Welcome to the Finding Families podcast, where each episode we explore different cases from our files. We identify and bring together family members with those they have never known but have always missed. Mostly we look for unknown birth files, where the magic of DNA brings much needed answers to lifelong searches. I am Louise Baldock, and this week I'll be talking to Maria Curran about her search. Thanks very much for sharing your story with us today, Maria. Why don't you start by telling us something about the family?
Growing up was, on the whole, was just myself and my mum. I had a brother that was 16 years older than me, and he'd gone away to sea just after I was born. Dad had taken him away to sea, probably because, looking back now, my mum had spoilt my brother to death. And he was spoilt. And I think when I came along, it gave my dad an opportunity to reclaim his son. And he took him away to sea. So that started a life of me and my mum in a little partnership, really. Tony had my dad in the partnership. We were sailing around the world in the Merchant Navy for a little while. And then Tony spread his wings and changed ships from my dad. I just was practically raised by my mum, not seeing my dad or my brother for months, and sometimes I'd never seen my brother for years as I got older. I can still remember Dad coming home back in the early 70s when you'd hear a black Hackney taxi come up the street, and in them days people still didn't have many cars, but hearing a taxi was always a special occasion. I suppose in a way like children today on Christmas Eve, they're listening out for the bells of the sleigh with Father Christmas on. For me, knowing that my dad was on his way home, waiting for that taxi and that shudder and the ticking over of a taxi outside, and then my dad coming through the door with his, always had a hold all. So my dad had the most amazing life at sea. He joined the Merchant Navy at 13 during the Battle of the Atlantic. He was the eldest of 5 children, and he had a very close relationship with his nan. And it seems there must have been tensions in the family because he asked his nan to help him get a ship. His nan got him the Lloyd's List, which was the shipping paper that had all the available boats that were in the city, in the dock at the time. And the only one that was able to take my dad was a Norwegian ship, because the Norwegian Merchant Navy had different rules. They would take you from 13, whereas the British Merchant Navy, you had to be 14. So my dad joined the Norwegian Merchant Navy for a short period until he got to 14, and then he transferred to the British Merchant Navy, and that started his life.
It's hard to believe, isn't it, really, that it could have been going to work so young.
He never gave the sea up for my mum. He never gave the sea up for his children. He just looked forward to going away to sea.
And he got married to your mum when he was 21. Is that right?
Yeah. Mum and Dad met on the pier head. She was working in the Liver buildings with her friend, and they were having lunch. And these 2 very dapper, young, handsome men walking along, and both of them spotted the 2 ladies, and they got talking. And so my dad made a date with my mum, and his friend Charlie made a date with Rose. And that started, a relationship. And then a year or 2 later, my mum got pregnant to my dad, and they got married pretty sharpish in the Mount Pleasant registry office. The story I got told was there was just the 2 of them. Their witnesses were brought in off the street, a passerby and a street sweeper. Yeah. So when people are looking at their marriage, like their family marriage lines, and you think to yourself, oh, well, there's witnesses as, Mary Smith and John Jones. Oh, they must be related to me, or they must have been their friends. No, not necessarily. Yeah. Somebody just been accosted on the street in Mount Pleasant. When you come in and be witnesses to this couple, please. So that was the story. There was not a single wedding photograph. I don't know what she wore. I don't know what my dad wore. I don't know what the family thought. But yeah, they got married on the 16th of December, 1949. And Tony showed up in the July 1950. Looking back at photographs of Mum and Dad as young people, Mum was absolutely stunning. She had film star looks, is how I would put it. Nobody really went out without makeup on. The clothing was very elegant in them days if they were going out. And so a lot of the photographs of my mum, she's wearing a very, very trendy coat. Her hair's immaculate. She's always smiling. She had a dimple in her cheek. She had the most stunning blue eyes. And then I look at my dad, and he wasn't a bad-looking man. But if you put him in the film star way, he probably would not have got the leading man role. He was. It was a loving, absolutely loving family. It was, when Dad come home from sea, he'd arranged with my mum and I. We'd go to New Brighton. New Brighton was the place to go, in the 70s. But sadly, never, ever, when Dad arranged for us to go over to New Brighton as a family, did my mum ever come with us. It was always me and my dad, and we'd get the bus into town and then the train over to New Brighton, walk along past what was New Brighton Bats in them days. There used to be a little fair there on the front itself, and he'd pay for me to go on some rides, and there was a few big pubs across the front. And he'd tell me to sit on a table outside, and he'd go in and he'd go and get himself a pint, and he'd get me some lemonade and a packet of crisps, and he'd come back out again. And that was time spent with my dad. There was never, ever a moment that I didn't know that I was not loved. I was absolutely loved to bits. We didn't have a lot of money. Christmases, when I was little, I got a few bits and pieces. I can still remember some of the toys I got. But as I got older, one Christmas was a black and white portable. I wanted a portable. They got me They must have saved all year round for that. They got me a typewriter. That was just all I got. A typewriter was another year. One year I got a Bontempi little organ, and I learned to play Oh Susanna on it, and Mum and Dad were so chuffed to bits that I could play it. And then I lost my mum and my dad. I was 29 when I lost my mum. Well, it was unexpectedly, although she'd been suffering for years. And then for the 12 months, I had to keep my dad going. Now, this man was a very, very proud man. He grew up very quickly during World War II, seeing things that people wouldn't normally have seen. He was a child. He knew how to handle himself. Wasn't afraid of anybody or anything, and I watched this man, 5'6", stocky man, crumble in front of my eyes. And
because your mum had died.
Yeah.
You mean?
Yeah. And I also remember thinking that my dad loved my mum more than she loved him. Now, I don't know why I ever thought that back then, but I just knew it. I was with my mum at the very end. I was with my dad at the very end. I was with my brother at the very end.
Family has always been important to Maria, and as she got older, she was keen to find out more.
I knew absolutely nothing about the current side of my family because my dad had become estranged from his family very, very early on, well before I was born.
Yes.
Never knew any of my cousins, my aunties. I wouldn't have known them if they walked in the house. And I knew that if I start my family tree, my education and university would suffer because I knew it was going to take me right down a massive rabbit hole. I knew that straight away without even having any experience. I patiently waited till I graduated in the July 1999. by the September, I was on it. I'd been chomping at the bit since my dad died in the March '97. And to be fair, I did not have much of a clue what I was doing. There was a local historian called Frank Carlisle in Liverpool, and he's quite
very famous.
Yeah, he said he runs a family history group, and it was down Vauxhall Road. So I went, and it was thanks to some of the things that he showed me what I needed to do that started the journey. And for anybody that's on that journey, the first step is the hardest because you're not sure what you're doing, where you're going, how best to approach this, how to lay anything out. And also, if you've got no information, you don't even know whether you're finding the right people. So I spent a lot of my first year out of university job hunting, but also still raising my boys and looking after the house and going to the main library in town. I've never experienced microfiche before. I didn't know how things were filed. I didn't know much about archives. Didn't know much about the internet, to be fair. And so I just had to go back. So I just went back with my nan and granddad, whose names I did know. And then that opened up everything for me. And I just slowly took my time, going back one generation at a time, till I got to my great-granddad and great-grandmother. And this is the lady that took my dad to sign, to look at the Lloyd's List papers. And I found out that her husband, which was my great-grandfather, had been killed by a sniper in World War One, and that had a massive impact on me. That broke my heart, if I think about it, and it made me all the more determined to keep looking for this family. I wanted to find out so much more about the current family, and he'd worked as a shipping clerk for the White Star Line, so he was working in the White Star building when the Titanic went down.
1912?
1912, yeah. So he's got a link to that. He's got a link to the Cunard building, which I ended up working in 10 years ago.
Maria, who's clearly a friendly and welcoming woman, always hoped she might one day find some more family.
Always on the back of everything is things that, about my mum and my dad, and thinking, well, there's no way in the world my dad's just got 2 children. He's lived a life away at sea. I'm going to find out, I'm going to go looking for this. I'm not
So you thought that your father might have had some other children?
Oh, definitely. Me and Tony had conversations over the years since Dad died, and I'd had conversations with Tony, and I'd said to him last year, did Dad have somebody special in Barbados? And he said yes. So I always thought, because Barbados was a very, very special place for my dad. He loved the music there. So then I was thinking, well, why can't I find any children that may have been born there? Then I'm thinking that maybe ancestry DNA isn't something that you do out in Barbados, Is it one of those countries where there's a law that the government don't allow you to do it? I was wondering, and I just thought, well, maybe in the future it'll come out. And I bought a DNA kit, and then I did it. I did my DNA, and I sent it away, and it come back in the September, and I sat on it, and I'm looking at it. And
do you want to explain what you get when you get your results?
Well, you're getting a list of strangers that are sharing DNA with you at different proportions. You'd be very lucky if you get an immediate high 3,000 plus centimorgans, or even 1,000 centimorgans. Everything that I had on my results, I could spot names that were familiar to me on my mum's side. But on my dad's side, the names that I'd been working to uncover from 1999 were non-existent. There wasn't a single Curran or Malone or Shields or Anchors or Goulburn. There was nothing like that. And I was thinking, this doesn't look right. But DNA was a minefield, and it still is to me. There's names here that I do not know. And I started to get this little inkling that something wasn't quite right. And I sat on it for ages, and I kept going back to it. And I was making contact with my cousins in the current family, just asking them randomly, have you ever thought of doing a DNA test? Do you know of any of the family that's done DNA tests? And some of them were saying, yes, we've done one. So I knew then that there was some current DNA out there, and I wasn't matching with any of it. I made contact with yourself and said, Louise, would you have a look at my DNA, please, because something's not quite right. And you said to me, of course I will, love. Let me have a look at it later. And I said, yeah, fine, no rush, you know. And when I got into the office, I sat down and logged into my email account and seen yours. And one of the first lines was, Maria, I'm so sorry, but Harry Curran isn't your biological father. I was hoping that maybe he was, but his dad wasn't his father, because he was born in the April and his parents got married in the December. It was a quick marriage. You said to me, but there's no Malones, there's no Currans, there's none of the names that you've been looking for.
I mean, that's a very, very big thing to find out after you've loved your dad and you look forward to the taxi bringing him home, and you've gone through all that time with him, and then you've spent all these years looking into the current family finally, because he's alienated from them, so he hasn't been looking into them. And then you find out that actually your dad's not your biological father. How was that for you?
Do you know, initially when you let me know what things were reading as, I was like, well, I knew something wasn't right. I knew it. That's why there's a gap between me and Tony. That's why my mum always used to say she only ever got drunk twice, which was her way of diffusing things. When people said, why is there a big gap? I don't think it actually hit me straight away. It was afterwards when I started to think, that's not my dad. Everything about me that makes me the person that I am is not a Curran. No, nothing about me is my dad. Everything that I've got is how my mum raised me, but with her DNA and a stranger's DNA. But what about all them lessons my dad taught me about standing up for myself and don't back down and, walk tall, lift your chin up, be confident, don't let yourself down. Then I started thinking, well, yeah, he's right. But they're lessons I had to learn. They weren't already in me. And I started to feel lost. I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. I missed my dad. I started to miss him dreadfully. I felt guilty. I felt like I wanted to ask questions of my mum. I'd look at my two boys and I'd be really, really feeling really sad, because them boys talked about my dad like he was a hero, talked about all the funny things he used to do with them, and I started to feel guilty, and I started looking at them thinking, they're not his grandchildren. And then I had my granddaughter, and so it would be my dad and mum's great-granddaughter, and I'm looking at her and I'm thinking, oh God, you know what, my dad would have loved her. He would have absolutely loved her, but she's not his. And I started to feel really, really bad and sad about it. Tony was heartbroken. I'm still your brother. I love you as much as I always have loved you, Moggs, because he used to call me Moggsy. And he said to me, I'll do a DNA test. And because I knew he wasn't very well, and I knew maybe life was running out for him, he did his DNA test, and I let him do it. And thankfully, all his DNA gives me the current lines. I then had to look for my biological family, and I was able to, with your help, narrow it down to 3 names out the same family.
When DNA testing companies like Ancestry, 23andMe and MyHeritage issue test results, they also provide a list of other people who have tested, and who share DNA with you. Blood relatives, mostly quite distant, who inherited that DNA from the same ancestors as you. And many of those DNA cousins have their family trees attached to their profile, so you can begin to see patterns, common geography, common surnames. Maria wanted to do her own research, but I told her which names and which geography she needed to look out for. Names that would have belonged to her 4 paternal great-grandparents.
My mum was a very, very shy, introvert person, and so it was a bit of a shock to think that she'd had another relationship. And I actually started to think sinister things about had something happened to her. And then I asked Tony, because he'd worked on the same ships as my dad, did any of these surnames mean anything to him? And of the first 2 names, he said no, no. And when I said the third name, he asked me to repeat it, and straight away he said to me that Mum grew up in the old neighbourhood with Mike, and Mike had the same surname as the name I gave Tony. And
From your DNA.
from my DNA.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the name that I'd suggested to you was a family name, which was quite an unusual family name. When you said that to Tony, he said to you, your mum had a friend Mike with that surname.
Exactly, yes. And then not only did he say that, he told me he can remember seeing them talking in the street and my mum was laughing, and he never saw my mum laugh with my dad, Harry, like that. He'd gone into the pub one night and my mum was standing getting herself a drink to bring over to the house. Tony had gone in the pub and seen them talking and laughing, and he actually said to me only 2 years or so ago, Maria, there was chemistry that was never ever there with mum and dad. Then he told me that Mike was a carpet fitter, that he had a shop in Shaw Street, that he'd offered Tony an apprenticeship as a carpet fitter, and Tony said no, he didn't want to do that. So Tony got a job in a radiator company down in Fenwick Street or somewhere down.
This was after he came out of the Navy.
This was before he went in the Navy.
Before he went.
This was before my dad took him, yeah. So Tony was able to put some meat on the bones for me. So I started looking even closer. We were able to find the grandparents and to start bedding things in to make sure that we had the right people. But nobody had done any DNA. Local, none of the children, the grandchildren or anything had done DNA. So we were still left with this unusual surname and Tony's acknowledgement of that surname and a relationship between Mike and my mum. But we'd found out that Mike had died and that his brother had also died.
We worked with Maria to find out more about Mike, his marriages and his children, his sons who would be her brothers.
I was able to build little trees for the Liverpool brother, but I could not find where he lived. And you would think, being on my doorstep, I'd find him. Jimmy was in Northern Ireland and their records are not open as much to us as the UK records. It was a bit of a trawl, and eventually, after talking with yourself and we were looking at best ways to go about it, you advised me to put a letter together, and I did. I thought, I'm just going to literally jump in at the deep end here, and I just wrote the letter and said something to the effect of, "Hi James, my name is Maria Curran. My mum was Maureen Gilmartin and my dad was Harry Curran. He was a seafarer. They lived in the old neighbourhood where your dad was raised and your grandparents had a pub. I mentioned about our Tony remembering that Mike had a son called Lance. Oh, I mentioned about his dad being a carpet fitter, offering Tony an apprenticeship, because they were all validating points that I felt that this man..."
He would know you were telling the truth if he read your letter.
Yeah, because I see a lot of things on Facebook on the DNA links and stuff, and people become very suspicious of people, and they always think that you're after something. And I
Yes.
just said, I apologised. Please forgive me for having to write this. I would just like to know more about Mike, who I believe is my father, my biological father. And I posted the letter on a Friday, second class, so that it wouldn't get there, hopefully, until the Tuesday, maybe, to give me time. I gave him links to my Facebook page. I opened up some private photographs so that even if he didn't want to friend me, he would see some public photographs of me, Tony, my mum, my boys. In like that, maybe they might have been able to see some family resemblances. And I said to him to email me if he wanted to email me, and I just said, I'm sorry if this has opened up a can of worms. That's not my intention. I was just looking for information. My sincere best wishes, Maria. And it went in the post. And I got an email on the Monday, so it caught me out. And straight away, he said to me that he'd been in touch with Lance, and Lance had remembered my mum. They remembered my mum in their house down in Toxteth. They remember how beautiful my mum was. She was a very stunning lady. They'd seen my mum on numerous occasions. So that validated it for me. But that was I might have opened a can of worms to them, but they opened one to me, because I never in a million years expected to get that.
Because you didn't really know if your brother would write back to you or acknowledge
No,
your letter or
no,
anything.
I didn't. And I had the feeling that if it was ignored, that was as far as it went. I'd asked him to ring me if he wanted, email me, and he did. He did, and he showed photographs to all of his kids, to Lance. All Lance's children have looked. One of them in particular, Joe, is a lovely lad. And as soon as he saw pictures of me, a younger me, he identified that I looked like another half brother that sadly died in a house fire 30 years ago. They said that I looked like him. And then that immediately in that email, Jimmy had said to me that he's going to do a DNA, and he hopes that the results of it are what I want and what he wants. He wanted me to be his sister, and I thought that was so beautiful. It
It
made me
is.
feel, because there's so many people out there, Louise, doing the same as me, and they might never be as fortunate as me. So he did his DNA. He applied for it. It arrived. He did it, and he went on a cruise. Cruises seem to be something in this family. He messaged me one day on the cruise, and he said it was supposed to take 8 weeks, Maria. He said it's going to be ready in a couple of days. And I said, well, listen, you're on a cruise. Stop looking. I said, whatever the results are, we'll find out when you come back. I'd totally forgotten that when I was looking in my DNA, it's going to pop up. I totally forgot all about that. I'm doing me nosing around as usual, and there's Jimmy's name, and I clicked on the relationship bit. And of all the relationships, it could only be one, and that was half brother. And he shared just 25 centimorgans less than Tony, my brother, with my mum. So I then
So
had
you
to,
knew then, you knew for certain
yes, I knew for
that.
certain. I had to upset his cruise and tell him, and it wasn't an upset. He actually rang me, and he was absolutely over the moon, and immediately he started calling me sis. Lance calls me sis. The nephews call me auntie. Oh Maria, oh Maria, oh Maria, and I just find it lovely. I've met Jimmy in Ireland. I went over there as soon as I stepped out of Belfast Airport, and I seen him. I just heard this break in his voice, and I said, "Are you all right?" And he said, "Oh, you're one of us, all right." He said, "You've got the same nose, you've got the eyes." He said, "You've even got the dimple in the cheek." I said, "Well, that might be from my mum as well, because she's got a dimple." And his wife, immediately she saw me, she went, "Oh, Jesus," she's proper Belfast Northern Irish accent, that she just went, "Jesus, Maria, you are Jimmy's sister." And then I met a niece, and we spent 4 days together. It was lovely. And I've also met Lance, and I surprised him on his birthday. I'd got in touch with his son, who I hadn't met at the time, Joe, and we were meant to be going out for a meal, and I found out it was Lance's birthday. I messaged Joe and said, "Is your dad doing anything?" He said, "No, he's just going to the local pub." I said, "Can I surprise him?" He said, "I'll meet you outside the pub." So for the first time I met Joe, it was to surprise his dad. So I sneaked in behind Joe, and Lance said to his son, "All right, son." He said, "Happy birthday, Dad." And as I stepped from one side, I went, "Happy birthday, Lance." And he just went, "Oh, my God." He said, "Oh, my God, this is the best birthday I've had in years." And then all of his friends were around the pub, and they were all looking, and I've been introduced as, "Oh, you're Lance's sister, aren't you?" And it's absolutely wonderful. But yeah, they've took me under their wing. Their dad is my dad. Their grandparents are my grandparents. I've introduced them to information about their family that they didn't even know about because my research has had to sort of go far and wide, really, to
Yes.
get confirmation that I've got the right family. Lance actually told me a couple of weeks ago that he was only a little boy. They were raised by their dad and their grandmother. He said, when your mum used to come to our house, he said, I used to sit on her knee and she'd be telling me stories and singing songs. And I said, she was a terrible singer. He went, oh, I don't remember that. I said, oh, yes, she had a terrible voice. He said, Maria, I just remember how lovely and caring your mum was.
You've got a photo of Mike, I think, haven't you? Or a
I've been,
few photos.
yeah, I've got quite a few photographs of him, of his second wife, Martha. I've seen a photograph of my grandparents.
Wow. Now,
There's,
I happen to know, Maria, that you particularly value family photographs because in all the time I've known you, you've always had a lot of
yeah,
family photographs. So, does
yeah,
this mean that you now have pictures in your home of your new father and your new grandparents as well?
I do have a wall or two walls of photographs. They're special photographs, so they will be going up there. Yeah, I do value photographs, and I do worry about what's going to happen to them when my time comes, because my boys are not interested. I don't really think the next generation are so much, but I never stop talking to my children, although they're adults now. I talk to Sophie, my granddaughter. I always say to her, that's your great-grandmother, that's your great-grandfather, because I've got a cushion on my bed of my mum and dad, and that was done by a friend of mine years before I found out that my dad wasn't my dad.
Well, he
Um,
is your dad, he's
he
just not your
is, yeah,
biological father.
yeah. He's not my biological father, but yeah, but I do point out. I'll be in the cemetery to see my biological father's grave and Kevin, the brother who died. And I went with Sophie a number of times, and she said to me, Nanny, who are those people? And I've said they're friends of mine. And then when I got confirmation of the DNA with Jimmy, I went and I introduced Sophie, and I said, see this man, that's your great grandfather, love. She said, I thought it was your friend. I said, well, I have to say that for the time being, love.
You've been then on this very big journey, and ironically, as your Tony has sadly died, leaving you with no family,
Yeah,
you've suddenly, miraculously, managed to find some new people to be part of.
yeah. I look at it as Tony helped me on this journey by the knowledge that he had, and that's a little legacy that he's left me. And I just wish, I've got one regret, and I wish I'd have done this 12 months earlier when Tony was still well enough, because he would have met them and there would have been conversations. Creepy thing is that back in 2006, I parked my car outside a house where a new friend of mine, I'd made friends with this girl I worked with, and I parked my car outside this man's house, and there was an elderly man on the steps smoking a cigarette, and I said to him, "Is it okay if I park my car outside yours?" And he said, "Of course you can, girl." That's the words he used, "Of course you can, girl." It turns out that man was my biological father, because when Jimmy was over in Liverpool the other week, I drove him down the street, and he said to me, "Oh," he said, "this is my dad's old street after he married Martha." He said, "That's the house." I said, "That's my friend's house just across the road." I parked outside that house. I spoke to the old man that was standing on that step. I said, "I've met our dad."
I find that quite remarkable because I must have parked outside a
Well,
million people's
I
houses.
actually remember, because when I went into my friend Sam's, I said to her, "I couldn't park outside yours. I parked over the road." She looked out the window and she went, "Oh, that's outside old man, mister." And she gave the surname of him. And it was an unusual surname. So I am under no illusions that I was standing talking to my biological dad, and we didn't know.
Wow.
She gave
Yes,
me his name. So
absolutely.
and Michelle is the one of two variations of Michael. Plus, she called me Maria Michelle. She left me clues, and before she went into a coma when she was dying, she got hold of my hand and she said to me, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." And I said, "What have you got to be sorry about, Mum?" And she just looked at me and she went, "I'm so sorry." And I think if my dad had gone before her, she would have
She'd have
told me.
told you.
She'd have
Yes,
told me
probably.
everything. Yeah. But I find it quite sad that she kept that secret to herself. She never told her mum. She never told her two sisters. She never told anybody. She kept that to herself. And the only person she wanted to confide in was me. But
And that's, I suppose, the mystery and the beauty of DNA, really, because if you didn't take that DNA test to see whether your father had any other children out there in the world, you would never have known.
it's down to us, the next generation, to uncover these little mysteries and find out what's going on and do answers.
Would you say, having gone through all this experience, that you feel like you've had a happy ending, or would you rather that you didn't ever know?
I started a journey that I got an unexpected ending. People love looking for skeletons. A family tree isn't as exciting if you can't find a skeleton. And skeletons come in many shapes and forms. You know, you might come across, you might be related to somebody famous. And I know on my mum's father's Irish Sligo side, I've got an Olympian gold medalist from Los Angeles. My journey has been absolute. It's took the world in, you know, and that's thanks to Dad Harry with his seafaring history, but also my nan from Devon, you know, going into service and meeting an Irish soldier. And but yeah, I don't regret my journey, Louise. You know, only one regret I've got is that I didn't write to Jimmy 12 months or 2 years earlier. I could have done. And I'd have had Tony with me then, and he would have been able to have conversations, and these conversations would have opened up more information, more memories.
A lot of people do regret not starting their journeys earlier, although for many it simply wouldn't have been possible. Professor Sir Alec Jeffreys of Leicester University didn't discover DNA fingerprinting until the 1980s, and it was decades after that when people began to understand how it could help with genealogy and breaking down brick walls within family trees.
That's
Now,
marvellous.
yeah, and more marvellous is that I've been welcomed with open arms. It's amazing.
Yes.
You know, I've had a ball. Honestly, I've had a ball. It's been an eventful journey, It's been a lot of hiccups. It's been a lot of banging my head against brick walls. It's a bit of getting frustrated because I don't know where to go, and getting frustrated because not all the records that you want are online, and it's frustration when people don't want to talk to you. But I've got you to thank for helping me along the way, because when I was wobbling, you put me back on the right line and directed me. It was literally like taking me stabilisers off my bike and you pushing me in the right direction and telling me to keep pedalling. Keep pedalling, Maria, you're going to get there. The faster you pedal, the straighter you'll go, you know. And I was right, absolutely right, you know. Yeah, what a journey.
Well, that's lovely, really lovely. Thank you. Thanks ever
Yeah,
so much for that.
A big thank you to Maria for sharing her story. I don't know about you, but I needed the tissues a few times. If you have a family mystery that you think DNA can solve, do come and talk to us at Finding Families. We'd love to help. Our website is www.findingfamilies.co.uk. Music today from Lisa Hoyle.